Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra deck tech. And today I finally want to talk to you guys about Lee Sin, the Dragon Kick deck that's on everybody's mind, and it's kind of become the new bane on Ledger and is sort of like the spiritual successor to Karma Ezreal in a way. And in a way it's worse, as in like worse to face, harder to deal with in a way. I feel like, and it might not keep existing the way it currently exists past the next patch coming in this week. So until then, we'll dive into it. I'll talk you through my current version that is heavily based on Alanzq's version, who did a great job of figuring out the right direction for the archetype in the beginning, and has since been iterating on it, and I'm somewhere in between some of his versions, I think. But I'll talk to you about the list, and then we'll dive into some Masters games to show how to pilot it as usual. But before we do so, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button down below if you haven't yet, to not miss out on future content. Alright, so here's the deck. The list is pretty straightforward in terms of numbers. It's basically a bunch of 3-offs and a 1-off, a very like straight list. But I'll talk you through the cards. So first off, we have the units. We have Spacey Sketcher, Eye of the Dragon, Mentor, Solari Priestess, Tasty Fey Folk, and obviously Lee Sin. I currently don't run any Dragon Claws, and I think like Alan has been going back and forth between Dragon Claws and no Dragon Claws, but I have not been too impressed with the card in general whenever I tried it, and it felt like the deck doesn't like need them too much, and they're not even doing that much against aggressive decks a fair share of the time. And I don't like them more than other cards for now. I could be wrong. I think in his latest list he even has Fey Folk and Claws. Before he kind of like swapped Claws for Fey Folk for a bit, and now apparently he has both. I'm not sure if that is necessary. And yeah, Dragon Claws are just kind of underwhelming in like a lot of matchups like that aren't super aggressive, and it seemed like the deck should probably be fine against more aggressive decks in a similar way as like Karma Ezreal used to be. Although you don't have the removal that PNZ offers, obviously, but you have other tools. So Sketcher, I was initially a bit skeptical of, but it actually adds quite a lot to the deck. So basically the good cards to get are Equinox to solve opposing problems, something like Infinite Mind Splitter and Endure, and various other like problematic units that you could be facing, Jack the Winner sometimes, and so on. Then Strike, so the 3-cost stun to units, can be really good when trying to buy time, making this sort of like a worse mini-yone. Messenger is just a great like general go-to to get just as a turn 2 play, and because it replaces itself. The 0-cost Challenger, the Snake, can be another great option in terms of like providing you with sort of a pseudo Mystic Shot type thing that costs 0, which is pretty great. And the other cards, like the 0-cost cost reduction spell is nice because it's a 0-cost burst spell that gains your mana back, but it's like only something you usually want to get if you can afford it card economy wise, because you're really like down 2 cards effectively at this point, because you play a 1/1, which is super low impact a lot of the time, and then you get a card that basically just gets you a mana and nothing else. But it can also be a viable option to like get Lee out in a critical turn and be able to protect him and stuff like that, or just have like a cheap, like a 0-cost burst option to give him barrier unexpectedly and so on. So yeah, Sketcher is just like quite flexible, and you have some things you can sometimes discard, like having a clunky Meditation in your early hand against an aggressive deck is something to discard. Extra copies from Hush, Mentor Gems, stuff like that. Then Eye of the Dragon really doesn't need much explanation. It's just an amazingly powerful 2-drop and like a premium card, and one of the cards that makes these Ionia sort of reactive spell-heavy decks tick, basically. These decks would maybe not even be possible, or at least as competitive, without Eye of the Dragon existing. Then Mentor of the Stones. Also pretty straightforward. It's just basically there for the buff and the gems. Ideally, you play it, get 1 buff out of it, get 3 gems, which makes it that much easier for your Lee Sin to level, for your Lee Sin to kill bigger stuff, and for your Lee Sin to consistently challenge and barrier without major mana commitments, and also being able to heal him back up when he takes some damage, so he doesn't get in the risk of dying. You can also sometimes just buff your Eye of the Dragon into a 3/5, making it a really obnoxious blocker to get past, and stuff like that. It's just a powerful card, and one of the cards that might not be existing in the same way after the patch, but not sure what they're gonna change and so on, so they're just like wild guesses, but Mentor is a card that I could see getting a change in some form, especially because of this deck. Then we have Solari Priestess. I think Alan in his latest version somehow only runs 2, but I thought it was actually really smart to run Priestess. My first version of the deck had Zed basically instead of Priestess, to have sort of like a backup Lee Sin type champion that basically works really well with buffs and sort of duplicates the damage you generate with him. But Priestess, just getting you written in the stars and also answers to problems and additional threats, is just a better solution, because getting written in the stars for Lee Sin is just better than getting like a worse Lee Sin instead in the form of Zed. And being able to get Meteor and stuff like that are great additional jobs this card does. Or just value chain with Traveler and stuff like that. Just a really good card, and I've been very happy with the card in the deck, and it makes the deck a lot more consistent. Then we have Tasty Feyfolk. I basically had 3 as one of Alan's versions, then I went down to 2 to fit the 3rd Concussive Palm, which he didn't have at the time, and then decided that maybe the deck doesn't really need the one of Bastion as much as another like good defensive unit, so I cut the Bastion to add a 3rd Feyfolk, and I've been pretty happy with Feyfolk so far. It just does a lot in terms of defense, like it often nullifies almost an entire attack, trading with a solid unit, and eating up a lot of the damage from the other units. It's also obviously sometimes just a great thing to buff with Mentor and stuff like that, or with Venus Blade, suddenly giving you like a 5/4 Overwhelm lifesteal that can become really obnoxious, protected by your other spells. So yeah, just a pretty good defensive option to come out of Call of the Mountain. And Lee Sin doesn't really need much explanation. He's like the deck's Ezreal that also does a lot of like board control and value stuff by constantly challenging units from the opponent each turn and killing them, or dissuading attacks, because the 4 health actually means a lot of units can't attack into him without dying. So just really powerful. Forecast Lee Sin is so good, and he might also get a readjustment in the next patch potentially. I could see that they maybe, I don't know, up his level up condition a little more even, or maybe making him 5-cost champion, which would even be pretty reasonable given that there are already 2 other 4-cost Ionian champions, and it was a bit weird that they added a 3rd and left us with 0 5-cost Ionian champions, but we'll see if they change anything and how they change it. But I feel like the deck in the way it currently exists isn't the most fun and healthy for the game, because I feel like it is more obnoxious and more well-rounded and kind of harder to punish or beat than Ezreal Karma was, and that was already like hugely disliked and unfun to a lot of people. So yeah, those are the units. Now let's talk about the spells. Other options basically are only like Dragon Claws really, and initially there were some gift givers, which were neat, but they're a bit low impact, so I can see it making sense to not run them anymore, and Dragon Claws is like the only other option, I think. And like I said, I'd rather not run them if they are not super necessary, and so far I'm not convinced they are from my experience with the deck. And then the spells, Behold the Infinite, a card that I like definitely undervalued and didn't like as much when it was spoiled, because it just seemed so dirtily, but in the end it's basically sort of like a 2-cost cantrip slash sort of, it's somewhere between a cantrip and a tutor. Obviously it doesn't make your deck smaller like a cantrip normally does, so it doesn't like actually generate velocity, but it like gives you a pseudo tutor effect for removal or threats type of stuff. And it is just good in spell decks in the sense that it's like a 2-mana burst spell that adds to your spell trigger stuff for something like Lee Sin and Eye of the Dragon, for example, or Claws of the Dragon, and so on. So it makes a lot of sense, and it gives you more access to Written in the Stars, Meteor, and a couple of the other like valuable ones, Equinox, Zero Cost Challenger, or just Messenger or Traveler for like affordable value, or just like finisher potential if you really need it. You usually don't go for the like finishing potential much with Invoke in this deck actually, but it can come up sometimes. Then Guiding Touch. I still can't believe that they printed like so many good cheap burst cantrips in this set. If you count Behold the Infinite, there's like 3 of them in a way that work really well with spell synergies, but I think Guiding Touch and Pale Cascade are the bigger ones because they are actually cantrips. So with Guiding Touch and Pale Cascade in your deck is basically 34 cards effectively, which is so small in a like 40 card game where every draw step is like business because you don't have lands or anything in your deck. And that might turn into a problem in the long run. And especially Pale Cascade is just so absurd. But Guiding Touch is very solid, while Pale Cascade is just absurd. Like the card is so obnoxious. Like turn 2 Eye of the Dragon with like 2 mana, your opponent almost can't attack or block on turn 2, because if you then Pale Cascade your Eye of the Dragon, eat one of their units, you are left with like a 1/2 Eye of the Dragon, they lose one of their units. You didn't even lose a card, and it's just disgusting. Like it's just, Pale Cascade is so dumb, and I think it's a card that is too good and might need some tweaking going forward, and we'll see if they do that. Like the card is so good that I think it would easily see play in Constructed and Magic, where usually combat tricks are not very good in Constructed, and the bar for Constructed playable combat tricks is pretty high. And like cards like Back to Back at 5 before it was nerfed were cards that wouldn't even like seem like good cards outside of Limited in Magic, let alone Constructed playable or Constructed staples. Well, here they were good enough that they needed to be nerfed. So imagine like how insane something like Pale Cascade is if it would be good enough to also end up in Constructed Magic. The card is just like way past the power level, the reasonable power level for combat tricks in Runeterra, I think. They overshot with this one, in my opinion, but we'll see how they feel about it. But that's just my opinion. Like I think the card is just dumb. Then we have 1 Hush. Recently, I think in his latest version, Alan actually cut 1 Hush, but I don't see how you like run 0 Hush in a Targon deck. Also, you have the synergy with Sketcher. It's just really good in the mirror sometimes, and it's just a very versatile card. So I don't see how you ever like not want to run 1, especially if you can always just ditch it to Sketcher if you don't need it. So 1 is like very low opportunity cost, and I think it's a mistake not to have 1. I could even sometimes, I have even been considering a 2nd, especially for the mirror. That's one of the best cards you can have actually, because the mirror is otherwise kind of a shit show. Now we have 3 Zenith Blade. People are going back and forth between 2 and 3. I'm still a fairly big fan of 3, both because it's so integral to Lee. The extra copies you get, you can use, like I said, on Fey Folk. You can use to discard to Sketcher, or you can use them as backup if your Lee gets killed and you need another Lee. I've just been pretty happy with 3 all in all, because I feel like sometimes you have the problem of not finding a Zenith Blade for your Lee fast enough, and then you can't win the game. And it's nice to reliably have your overwhelm Lee, so you can actually win those close games where you win before they would kill you the next turn. There's nothing you can do other than winning to avoid that. So yeah, pretty happy with 3 Zenith Blade for now. Concussive Palm, not much explanation or introduction needed. One of the premium Ionia cards, especially since Will got nerfed, and just a really great offense, defense tool. You can attack with your Lee into anything, challenge anything. If they have Hush or any kind of trick that might try to blow you out, you can just palm the unit so your Lee doesn't die. That's great on defense. It just does everything. It's just an amazing card. And then we have Deny. I initially was a bit skeptical of 3 Deny, because it is really clunky since it costs 4. But the deck just really needs to protect Lee, and there are a couple of powerful effects and heart removal that you really want to deny. So 3 Deny has actually played pretty well. And then 3 Deep Meditation, you go to like value sort of card advantage tool in Ionia decks of this sort. And since we don't have a Karma here, like in Ezreal Karma, it's pretty easy to just run 3 meditation, while in the Karma Ezreal, the third meditation was kind of up for debate because the deck didn't need it as much and the card can be clunky. But here it's kind of like your primary, like 2-for-1 card draw type thing, so makes sense to run 3. So yeah, this is the list currently. Cards that could be worth considering, I think, potentially could be something like Steel Tempest and Will of Ionia and more Hush, and maybe going back to 1 Bastion, possibly. But that's really about it. And for now, I like where this is at, and we don't even know how long it will stick with us in the current form. But yeah, the deck is actually kind of cool to play and pretty challenging to play, quite rewarding. But yeah, it's also like really frustrating to play again, and can feel really, really overpowered. So yeah, not the happiest with the deck existing, I think, in the current form, even though I'm playing it and I'm kind of enjoying playing it. Also, the mirror is kind of like a very like draw dependent shit show where there isn't a lot of decisions involved and there's just a lot of like high rolling stuff. Oh, what's going on with my hair here? Anyway, that's it for the deck tech. Hope you guys understand the deck and the version a bit better. Let me know how you feel about this version. Have you had your own experiences? And yeah, give it a try, and I'll see you in a moment with the first game. So stay tuned.